Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host Raghunath and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York City, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to our show. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we are here, Wisdom of the Sages. If you're new to this whole thing, it's a daily study of yoga literature. It's the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's considered, we did this originally for yoga teachers who want to go deeper into the philosophy of yoga and how to practically apply it on a regular basis. If you're not a yoga teacher, you're still welcome. If you're just a fan of yoga culture or old world wisdom, this might be for you. We find that by adding these principles to our life, it gives some spiritual direction to upgrade our choices. And we like it, and we're slightly addicted to it. And that's a good thing. We need some healthy addictions in our life. I've had too many addictions that break us down, beat us up. We need some healthy addictions to bring us up. So we're here at 5 a.m. every morning. Please join us. Kaustubha?
Yeah, I'm here. I've joined. I'm with you.
Okay, good. Mara, you got to check in. If you're interested in joining us live, we have a Zoom group with 107 people, man. Who's going to be lucky 108 today?
Well, there's two ways.
There they go. What? Wait, no, went down to 105. One person's like, I'm out of here. Nope, there we go. Went back to 107. Anyway, if you want to join our little Zoom cult, it's quite fun. We get secret names and passwords to get in here. You just have to email Mara at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, and then you can join this little Zoom family. Anything you want to share this morning before we dive in, Kaustubha?
No.
Am I missing anything?
No. Did Mara have something to read today? Were you going to read a letter or something like that? Maybe not.
She's like,
not really.
We're getting a lot of mail. It's like almost overwhelmingly mail, but please send it, especially if you're one of the others. The others are people who aren't joining us live. They're just sort of out there floating around, mysteriously stalking us. We welcome the others. Welcome. But we want to hear from you and tell us if you're liking it, if we could improve, how you found us, etc. So write us at wisdomofthesages108@gmail and let us know how we can serve you better.
You know, I really feel apologetic because we are getting so many nice letters and we haven't responded to all of them because it's we got to figure out our system.
It's a little overwhelming. The podcast got big quick.
But please, if we haven't gotten back to you right away, it's not that we didn't really appreciate receiving it, and we will get back. And we're going to get our act together. We're going to start to respond more timely.
I know.
But thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So we are in the first canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The great Emperor Prickett has been, we spoke about his birth. Want to do a tiny little recap?
Yeah, yesterday we kind of jumped ahead because we read Mahabharata and we came up to his curse and how he spends his final days. But hopefully that gave some nice context for people that are less familiar with it. And now we're still now at his birth. We're hearing about his birth, about the astrological calculations that were going on. It's already been mentioned. I guess the Brahmin mentioned it. This is unusual, right? But I think he said, he's going to get bit by a snake bird. He said that, right? I think
in this astrology.
I think he did say that.
Usually the astrologer never
wouldn't say something like that. Right? Yeah, it just struck me that he said, after hearing about his death, which will be caused by the bite of a snake bird sent by the son of a Brahmin, he will get himself freed from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of God, taking shelter of him. So yeah, that was unusual astrologer protocol there. But
usually the astrologer doesn't mention your death. He always leaves that out. Or she always leaves that. Have you ever got your chart done, Kaustubha?
I've had my chart done, but never like in too much depth. Abhi kind of reached out to me earlier this year and was asking for, he wanted to check out my chart. Our friend, who's a nice astrologer.
You didn't do
But
it.
no, I did it. But
You did.
you know, he just kind of spoke to me in more general terms. Not like when I'm going to die or anything like that.
He never asked that
But
question.
to speak of like how. But in any case, so that was mentioned in text 27. And so now we're on text 28.
All right. Text 28. Text 28.
So it's 1:12:28.
Gotcha. Canon 1, Chapter 12, Text 28. After inquiring about the proper self-knowledge from the son of Vyasa. Oops, I forgot to say the mantras.
The mantra.
Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. And no one said anything.
Nobody.
Nobody said anything.
Everybody's muted. What are they going to say?
Oh, that's right. That's how I like them. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati utama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service to the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Oma gyanatamurandasya gyananjana shalakaya chaksurunmadatam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. All right. Text 27.
28.
28. After inquiring about proper self-knowledge from the son of Vyasadeva, who will be a
Sukadev
great
Goswami.
right, who will be a great philosopher, he will renounce all attachment and achieve a life of fearlessness. Is the astrologer still?
Yeah.
Is the astrologer still
This
talking?
astrologer speaking,
Okay.
which is
Excellent.
Daumya, the priest of the
The
Pandavas.
Thus, those who are expert in astrological knowledge and in the performance of birth ceremony instructed King Yudhisthira about the future history of his child. Then, being sumptuous, it reminds me my kids were born. We had our home births, and I was sitting there with a phone as the children were being born. Like everyone's doing something important. I'm like with the phone trying to get their exact time as soon as they came out of the womb. I was like, we're going to need this in the future. Thus, those who are expert in the astrological knowledge and the performance of the birth ceremony instructed King Yudhisthira about the future history of his child. Then, being sumptuously remunerated, Mara?
Remunerated. Yeah, I think you had it right the first time.
Being sumptuously remunerated, they all returned to their respective homes.
Yes.
So his son would become famous in this world as Prickett, the examiner. Prickett means the examiner, because he would come to examine all human beings in his search after the personality whom he saw before his birth. Thus he would come to constantly contemplate him.
Okay, so we should go back now and mention that it was earlier mentioned that while he was in the womb, he was attacked. The character named Ashvatthama sent a kind of like a mystic mantra weapon at him in the womb. And Lord Vishnu appeared there and kind of blocked that weapon with his club.
Vishnu did it with his
He's
arms?
swinging the club around and just... And so as an infant in the womb, Parikshit was able to see the form of Lord Vishnu. And that vision left a very deep impression in him. And so for his entire life, he became named Parikshit, the examiner, because he was always looking for that person again.
This is a, did you want me to read the purport of 30?
Let's read the purport.
Okay. Let's see what the masters have to say here. Maharaj Pariksit, fortunate as he was, got the impression of the Lord even in the womb of his mother. And thus his contemplation on the Lord was constantly with him. So the child in the womb, we're developing the consciousness of the child in the womb, we're developing the consciousness of the child in the womb. Once the impression of the transcendental form of the Lord is fixed in one's mind, one can never forget him in any circumstance. Would you say that's true with like us? It's sort of like we get some type of taste, we get some type of impression, we get some type of feeling. We don't even know why, and it stays with us, and it always draws us back. Would that be the same thing?
You know, I would imagine that this could be understood on more than one level. You know, like in Parikit's case, that impression was so profound that he went through his entire life in this, you know, very high level of Krishna consciousness. And but at the same, in our impression may not be as profound, but you know what you're saying is true. I think that, like, I think you and we couldn't just forget, even though we may be stupid and, you know, waste time and so on, but it's pretty hard to forget, you know, the impression that we've had of Krishna, or of Krishna consciousness.
I mean, of course, even Lord Brahma can fall into illusion.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you get that deep impression in your consciousness and you're not being offensive, generally due to offenses, Krishna puts you in, or Maya puts you in illusion. Once you become arrogant, rude, brash, coarse with kind people, then you're covered by this illusion of ego. But yeah, the impressions are so deep that if we're not doing that, we can fall into Maya. I think the Maya is just, we have like addictions to bad choices. Isn't it interesting? The bad choices never fulfill us, yet we don't want to let go of them. It's such an illusion, the material world. It's like a figure eight we can't get out of. And you see it in I mean, we all probably have our own little figure eight of things that we do we can't get out of. Kaustubha, I'm ready to get out. Let go of these things I'm attached to.
Let go.
Let go, let God.
There you go.
Child Pariksit, after coming out of the womb, was in the habit of examining everyone to see whether he was the same personality whom he first saw in the womb. Are you him? Are you him? But the Lord was constantly with him by such examination.
It's like a pat down. How many arms you got there?
But the Lord was constantly with him by such examination, and thus Maharaj Pariksit was always engaged in devotional service of the Lord by remembrance. He's always thinking of Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis, one of those early students of Chaitanya living in Vrindavan. And he was a great scholar. And he was the youngest, right? Jiva Goswami was the youngest of them.
He was.
Jiva Goswami remarks in the connection that every child, if given an impression of the Lord from their childhood, certainly becomes a great devotee of the Lord, like Maharaj Pariksit. That is a good hope for parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look at this next statement here that Prabhupada makes.
One may not be fortunate as Maharaj Pariksit to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother. But even if he is not so fortunate, he can be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. There's practical example in my personal life. So the author is writing this. There's a practical example in my personal life in this connection. My father was a pure devotee of the Lord. And when I was only 4 or 5 years old, my father gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. A couple of forms? Does that mean 2?
One of each, I would assume.
One of each? Okay, or maybe 2
Here's
sets.
2 Krishnas and here's 2.
Just so they can interact and play with each other. Gave me a couple of forms of Radha and Krishna. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister, and I used to imitate the performance of a neighboring temple of Radha Govinda.
Have you been to that temple?
I've
Have you
never
been to
been
the
to
Radha
that
Govinda
temple.
temple in Calcutta?
I've
You've
never been
never
there.
seen Prabhupada's house where he grew up?
Never saw it. I haven't been to
Raghunath.
Calcutta in like 30 years.
We got to go.
I
I've
like
been
it.
there.
I'm actually going in October because we're going to Jagannath Puri and
Going to Mayapur?
Bhubaneswar.
Oh, so you're going to go to Calcutta? You're going to fly into
It's not
Calcutta?
part of our, every year, if you're new to this, every year I take a group to India. So it's Mayapur is not on the agenda. We're going to Varanasi, Jagannath Puri, Rishikesh, Haridwar, Vrindavan. Boom. What a lineup of holy cities.
But you're going to fly into Calcutta?
Flying to Calcutta.
And you're going to spend a day there?
I think we're actually flying into Delhi. No, I think we're going out quick of Calcutta. But maybe I can find some time.
Try to find some
I
time.
used to love Calcutta. Calcutta's a pretty cool city.
It is. I mean, it's, it's
well, you know what it is.
Modernization of it is pretty brutal, but.
Well, modernization, but when I went there in the 80s, you know what they did to Calcutta? The British built Calcutta from 3 villages. It was when I first went there, I had so many great times in Calcutta. There was 3 villages, like simple Indian villages, and the British just built like a city on top of it. And it's on the Ganges. So like in the middle, the British built like city parks, like the size of a block, and they dug out almost like ponds that were all fueled from the Ganga. So it's almost like all the ponds and all the parks are Ganga water. And so because it's Ganga water, it was such an interesting blend of like modern life and village life. So you'd have you'd have this city park, and I used to just walk around in these parks and just chant when I was young. And then you see someone sort of like power walking, exercising. And then you see a sadhu just like walk right into the pond. Like imagine in Central Park, someone just walks into the pond. They're taking a bath. They start praying in the water. I actually bathed in the Ganges in Calcutta. Another crazy blend of 2 cultures. So it's like 5 a.m. It's still dark out. And it's Calcutta. It's like, it's like a port. There's ships. There's things getting loaded on and off boats. Yeah, because it's the Ganges. There's a bunch of Brahmins like worshiping deities under a bridge. There's a bunch of very wealthy people, cultured Indians who are getting massages. This is a standard program. You get your massage, and then you take your bath in the Ganges. There's a bunch of ladies offering prayers, and there's a bunch of like cargo ships and like industry going on. It's quite a crazy blend, but it was magical because it was the Ganges.
Yeah, and the Ganges is magical, and Calcutta was like the first city that I ever went to that felt like New York when I got there.
It's got a New York vibe.
Yeah. But so Prabhupada grew up there, and you can see the home where he grew up, the kind of like the apartment building where he grew up, and directly across the street is the Radha Govinda temple, where his whole his whole clan, his whole extended family would worship.
It's like temple. It's nice. It's sort of like how there's this whole thing, the push to buy local food. It's like worship the local deity. Everyone had their local deity. They build up villages around a little temple. And everybody goes to that temple, and that's how the community comes together. Yeah. And so Prabhupada would imitate that when he was a child. Yeah. So I'm hoping that I introduced my children to worshiping deity. They all got a Gopal deity when they were little. If you ever seen these, if you're new to this.
Ladu Gopal?
Ladu Gopal. He's a little Krishna deity where he's just holding a little sweet ball in his hand. He's like a little baby. He's holding. So I got each child one of their deity.
Rooney has one?
Rooney does not, because he's
What's going on?
He's a little different. He's different. He's different.
Okay.
He was very into it when he was a little baby. It's one of his first words was puja daddy, maha daddy, and he would come and sit with me. But he's a little independent, so I try to just sort of like, you got to
be my new nickname for you. I'm gonna call you Puja Daddy.
They call me the Puja Daddy. And you're the Maha Daddy. You never know what happens. These things rub off on a person. And then people go through their teenage work, try to figure out who I am. And you never know what might remanifest. I think
Well,
a lot of
that's what Prabhupada describes happens to him here.
Okay.
That
So
he got that early
goes
impression.
on.
Yeah, let's read on. Keep
Okay. By constantly visiting the neighborhood temple and copying the ceremonies, right? That's how kids play. They copy what the adults do. By the constantly visiting the neighboring temples and copying the ceremonies in connection with my own deities of play, I developed a natural affinity for the Lord. My father used to observe all the ceremonies befitting my position. Later on, these activities were suspended due to my association in the schools and colleges, and I became completely out of the practice. But in my youthful days, when I met my spiritual master, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, again, I revived my old habits. The same playful deities became my worshipful deities in proper regulation. So his childhood deity, I know people who've done that. They were given a deity at childhood, and then they worship that same deity as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
This was followed up until I left the family connection, and I'm pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into the regulative devotional service by his divine grace, his guru.
That's a sentence says a lot, I am pleased that my generous father gave me the first impression. So his father's like, here, worship Krishna. Here's a form of Radha and Krishna. Do like they do in the temple. And he would become absorbed in that. But then when he met his guru, what was the term that he used? But developed later into regulative devotional service. That's when he began to take it all quite seriously, really practice the science, in the more proper form.
It's amazing how kid-friendly this stuff is.
It is. I mean,
it's incredibly kid-friendly.
Well,
I've never had to twist my arms of my kids to go to the temple. It's always like, yeah, it's almost like it's like a carnival, truthfully. It's like a carnival. There's like dancing, there's food, there's a gift shop, there's there's friends and community. It's not incredibly controlled, like sit up, stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down, stand down. Don't make any noise. It's like kids are a little free. It's a little bit sort of out of control. A bird fly, in India, a bird flies in, a bird flies out. Yeah, there's garlands of flowers getting thrown out. People are throwing garlands of flowers. It's like a transcendental carnival.
It's a festival.
But it's happening like every day. It's unbelievable when you go to some place like Haridwar in the ancient holy city, and they have every evening the giant lamp ceremony where they're offering the lamps to the Ganges. It's one of those things, the students, if you've been to India with me, everybody loves this part of India. They're offering the lamps, and like a bunch of people will jump in the Ganges. It's like swimming. It's like food and feasting. It's like there's people selling stuff, these are the impressions that last on kids' minds forever. I remember sitting down. Do you mind if I just keep talking?
No, keep going.
Okay. I remember sitting down, and all the students of mine were sitting there waiting for the Artik ceremony to start. That's where they offer the giant ghee lamps. And we're sitting there and just having soft kirtan, and it's packed with tons of people. And I'm jammed right next to this old man who's jammed next to a younger man who's jammed next to a bunch of kids. And he looks at me and just asked me where I was from. I said, yeah, I'm from New York. And he said, I said, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Gujarat. And I said, he said, have you been here before? I said, yeah, I come here every year. And I said, what about you? He goes, I came here when I was a child with my father. Now I'm here with my father again. And now I'm bringing my son. And I've waited many, many years to come here. And it's these impressions, like we do the same thing with our kids, but we take them to Epcot, or we take them to Disneyland, or to Busch Gardens, these are the impressions I had. Dad took me to that carnival, and it was great. But it's really based in a fantasy. From the beginning of time, the kids are reading, in the days of Prabhupada, they're hearing the stories of Lord Ram. They're sitting around with family members, telling the stories of Ram. By the way, Michelle Berger asked a good question. She said, like, why are these stories sometimes so violent? I just said, the Grimm's brothers were not violent either. You put the witch in the oven or whatever. But I was reading something from that Steiner said. It was a pretty interesting philosopher. He said, when you're just telling the stories, the kid only can make it out as violent. It's only when we start adding like the horror movie type of things where it gets really gruesome. It doesn't happen in a child's mind like that. They're seeing more of like archetypal actions happening.
Good versus
Death,
evil.
danger, good and evil, right and wrong, courage versus cowardice, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So where was I? I was on a reasonably.
You're Ganges, you're crammed up against that guy. Waiting a long time. It's a carnival.
It's a carnival. Oh, Mara, are you even paying attention? Where am I, Mara?
He came with his father. He brought his son.
You guys are going back too far. That's too far. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. God, jeez.
Any case.
Anyway,
it'll come back because let's just stick with this. This is such good stuff right here. Let's complete this commentary here.
Okay. If anybody knows where we are in print, if anyone knows where I left off, just write it in the chat board, please. Okay. Okay. Read.
So he said, this was followed up until I left the family connection, meaning when he was an old man and he took sannyas, he became a renunciate. He continued that worship of those deities. And I am pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. Maharaj Prahlad. Okay, so Maharaj Prahlad is another character from Bhagavatam who, as a young boy, was deeply absorbed in bhakti. Maharaj Prahlad also advised that such impressions of a godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity of the human form of life, which is very valuable, although it is temporary like others. Do you know what verse he is referring to there, Raghunath? There's the direct implication there.
Maharaj Prahlad also advised that the such impressions of godly relation must be impregnated from the beginning of childhood. Otherwise, one may miss the opportunity for human form of life.
Prabhupada always quotes the first line a lot. Kumara acharet pragno.
Don't know.
Dharman bhagavataniha. That one who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. And Prabhupada says, in other words, from the tender age of childhood to practice activities of devotional service, to practice Dharma and Bhagavatan, the Dharma that's directly related to Bhagavan, to Krishna.
Oh, man.
So,
sometimes you can really read this. I can read it. And just go like, what have I done? What have I done with my life?
What have you done with your life?
Regret. Right?
Well, I don't see it that way, Raghu. Why? Yeah, I mean, a little bit of that might be healthy, but then, like the door's open, right?
Door's open. So whatever was the past is the past. Today is today. Go forward, young man.
So what this verse is about is the Sanskrit word is samskara, right? That if our brain is like a computer, then what enters through our senses becomes downloaded onto the hard drive. And so those impressions are called samskaras, right? These impressions that are left in the mind. And so I thought it was such an interesting way that Prabhupada phrased this. Now, Maharaj Pariksit, he's like a unique person, right? He's meant to be emperor of the world. He's coming in the line of the Pandavas, and he has this very unique experience where Lord Vishnu appears in the womb to protect him, and he witnesses it, And Prabhupada says, one may not be as fortunate as Maharaj Pariksit to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother. But even if he is not so fortunate, he can be made so. Interesting, right? Yeah. He could be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. So he's saying that here's the responsibility of the parents, that I want my child to get the right impressions. Right? I want to expose them to that which is going to leave deep impressions that will be favorable to the child's developing that happiness that only comes through reconnecting with God. And so let me curate, those experiences for my child so that they'll have that experience. And
I remember what I was going to say, Kaustubh.
Oh, let's hear it.
We were talking about children and how it's like a carnival, and like in Bhakti, it's so kid friendly. They grow up, if they either hear the stories in the community or they're reading these comic books, like the Ramayana comic book, the Mahabharata comic. My kids have read all these comic books. They know every like little detail of these Puranas, but it's come in the form of like a type of entertainment. In the same way you'd read Spider-Man or whoever else, you read about or watch cartoons about, and that stays with them. But it's just in the child's brain, it just seems like good and evil, kooky characters like superheroes, and it matures when you're 12, and a little more when you're 15, and a little more when you're 25, and a little more when you're 35 or 55 or 75. These same characters from childhood are still there, but they're more refined, and you understand their backstory, and they start directing us in our life. So it's so kid friendly and welcoming. Chris Kelquist said, we've never done Disney with our kid, and some people think it's odd or we deny them something special. Chris, I never did either. Never took my kid. I don't even think my kids know who Mickey Mouse is. Serious, man. They know who Arjuna is. I don't think they know who Mickey Mouse is. Because, never watched them. They haven't known anything. It's good. Thank God. Thank God. Anyway, this stuff you get attached to it. And if you can develop those attachments from childhood, then this stuff makes a lot of sense, even more and more. And we're unpacking it. And also, if you have young children, teach them mantras. Make it a fun thing where you write a mantra on the board and they learn it. And kids memorize so easily. They won't even understand it. And then it will start to make sense as they get older. They'll unpack it. For them, it's just a game. We used to make games where when my big kids were little, I said, okay, you learn 10 shlokas, I buy you a wrist rocket. You know what a wrist rocket is? So like a really high-tech slingshot. Yeah. I'll buy you a jackknife with your name on it or something if you learn 10 shlokas. And so it became a game.
In other words, learn the sacred literature, receive a weapon. That's how it works in your family. Interesting kind of reward system. Receive a deadly weapon.
Learn sacred literature. 10 more verses, we'll send you a crossbow.
And for the grand prize.
For the grand prize.
And memorize the whole chapter, you get a Glock.
Careful, the Glock has no safety.
But let's look at this kind of like from a yogic perspective.
The Second Amendment award system, we call it. Learn shlokas and express your right to bear arms. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm always trying to take it to that next level. But look, I got to say something because I'm looking at Kumari and Rupa are here. They're like the divine couple. I like these two so much, and I'm thinking about adopting them as my own children. But they went through the whole already. But they are sort of grown up. But I'm still, when I see them, I tend to think they're my age, but they're not. They could be my children. So I'm actually thinking like they're success stories. They grew up practicing bhakti, and I'm sure they went through their teenage stuff. But there they are. Here they are. Wonderful as ever, these two. When you hang out with them, you feel uplifted. And they're success stories. So
me too.
Kumari Ji and Rupa.
I'm looking for them. I don't see them.
I know. They're wonderful.
Okay.
I just had to share that because we're talking about kids growing up bhakti.
Yeah.
I hope my kids are really good devotee kids. Or at least just good kids.
I'm never going to be able to make this point.
I'm sorry. You got a point.
Go ahead.
I just want them to have good character, truthfully. I just want them to have some good character.
I'm with you.
Okay, go on.
Okay, so a couple points here. One is that, I don't know much about Western psychology, but what little I do know is that it has a lot to do with the impressions that happen in your childhood, right?
They say 0 to 7. That's the big one that really creates the kid.
Yeah. And so if there's some kind of pathology, if there's something, if there's some kind of neurosis, from what I understand, a psychiatrist is going to often try to lead the conversation back to childhood and see if there are any clues there. What impression did you receive that's caused this issue?
What happened? That's the big psychiatry question. What happened? Yeah. Where were you? Where was your parents?
And so that's one point, is that the nature of the mind is that it's malleable, that it's being shaped by all of its by what comes through the senses, by the samskars, but that particularly in youth, it's very malleable, right? That the impressions are magnified. They're more important. They're most important. They're most influential in the youth. And so therefore, the parenthood is, from the bhakti perspective, it's a lot about exposing the child to the right samskars, to the right impressions. And if that's, in Prabhupada's saying, if that's done, it stays with you for your life, and helps direct that. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is that the yoga is all about adjusting the malleable mind in one way or another. Now, it's challenging, particularly as you're older, that the states of mind are so deeply set that it's not easy to shift it. And it's not even easy for us to concentrate our mind. And certain practices of, like if you look at each, like if you take 4 paths of yoga, like Ashtanga yoga, Jnana yoga, Karma yoga, and Bhakti-yoga, each one of them has a different way of approaching the mind, how it's going to address the mind. You listen to me, Raghu, you're just totally reading the chat board. I feel like
the chat board's out of control. It's all about parenting.
I need you, Raghunath, because like when I'm talking, I can't just talk out and tell you. I need you, man.
I need a second head. I gotta like manifest a Lord Brahma head.
No, so if you had 2, they would both be over the chat board.
All right, I'm sorry. Stop chatting, you guys. I'm blaming them.
So each path of yoga is going to have a different way of dealing with the mind. But the way that they deal with it, like for instance, in Ashtanga yoga, there's the 8 limbs. Yeah. So you're going to have, for instance, you take asana or pranayama. These are means to an end, right? You practice asana and pranayama and pratyahara and dharana. I'm going to concentrate on trying to hold my mind on one object for an extended point of time. That's a means to an end. And the end there, is that I can enter to a state of samadhi. And in that state of samadhi, I can go to the further end, really, which is to reconnect with God in my heart. And
it's like the means to an end. It's not like in the spiritual world, everyone's sitting silently.
Exactly. You're not right. Practicing asana or pranayama or pratyahara or dharana.
What is the spiritual world like? Everyone's just doing yoga, asanas.
Right. So those are the means to an end. There's something that you do and then you drop when you've achieved the end. And the same could be said for Jnana yoga, like the practice of study and analysis, trying to break all my material attachments through like cold analysis and combining that with practices of austerity, and renunciation. That's something that you practice to achieve an end. That, okay, now I'm free of my material desires and I've broken that. And even in karma yoga, the same, that I have a particular occupation. I see that occupation as my service to God. I do it in that, I do it with detachment and et cetera, et cetera. These are all means to an end. Now, bhakti is different. The path of bhakti yoga, the means and the end are the same. That Prabhupada's saying right here that when I was a child, my father gave me little deities of Radha and Krishna who I began to worship. Worship is just the expression of love for that divine couple. And that is something that one does as the practice as well as in the perfection. That practice leads to doing that just in the matured state, but the exact same kind of practice.
It's very cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it shows you how
You're
holistic
doing
it
it with
is.
that, right?
Right.
Great point.
And so the way that Krishna
you're
speaks
doing
about,
it before you even know you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's just it's like a game at first.
it's kind of what you see now. This is important. Now, someone who's kind of invested in one of those other paths may say, no, but this is important that one do this to achieve this goal. That, for instance, a Jnana yogi will say, well, if you don't become detached, how are you even going to practice yoga? But the bhakti yoga is going to say, no, by doing this practice, which goes right to the end, detachment comes the affection that I feel that naturally develops in my mind, or you could say in my heart, that overrides my material attachments. So I become detached automatically. I don't even have to directly, the Jnana Yogi is directly focusing on my material attachments, trying to understand them and analyze them and break them. Whereas the Bhakti Yoga is focusing on developing that affection for the beauty of Radha and Krishna. And the detachment comes on its own. Because by accepting the reality, one automatically lets go of the illusion.
And so from even in childhood, you can think, we just picked some apples from the apple tree, or we went to the store and bought some plums, or we just picked some flowers from the garden. Let's offer them. Even from childhood, the idea is I'm not the center. I offer to the center. I'm offering this. See that pretty flower? That would be great. And sometimes I hear my kids say that. They'll say, oh, look at these. The lilacs are in season. Let's offer some of those.
Right.
And you're thinking, oh, wow. From childhood, they're thinking, this isn't mine. I'm not the center. This is to offer to God.
Right.
It's so, and in one sense, it is sort of like a game, but you're changing the perspective or the vantage point of reality in the mind. And that's also what you're doing as an old lady or an old man. It's the same thing.
But then, you have all the philosophy to kind of understand it more deeply. But the tendency in the heart is already there. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
If you read the Gita, and we've had the fortune to study it under really good teachers. And they show that like these 4 paths of yoga, they're all valid. They're all good. In one sense, they're all leading to the same place. But Krishna is going to exalt bhakti in the Bhagavad Gita, as that's where it's all meant to lead to. So for instance, if I practice Ashtanga yoga and I take all these means to an end, if I practice, yama niyama, asana, pranayama, all of these techniques, they can lead me to a place where I can still my mind, where my mind, rather than being in a state of constant fluctuation, can be held steady. In other words, it means I'm no longer going to be affected by the constant distractions of this world, that my mind will become free of the distractions and be held steady. Now, that's an incredible accomplishment. It's a very difficult accomplishment. But the value in that accomplishment is that from that stage, I can reconnect with God. And ultimately that reconnection comes in the form of devotion. It leads to bhakti. It's meant to lead to bhakti. When Krishna speaks about Ashtanga Yoga in the 6th chapter, he says that you'll find me in your heart, and experience that love.
This leads to a good question, which I didn't have time to answer on question day, which was, someone wrote a great question. They're like, okay, I've listened to the show. I can't remember who asked this. I listened to the show. I listen to it every day now, but I did a whole 180 in my life. I wasn't a vegetarian, became a vegetarian. I do the japa meditation every day. I listen to the show. I'm reading or I'm listening to other sanghas. How necessary is it that I do asana in my life? Good question. Great question, I think. Can I do something that helps me? Like Satchidananda Maharaj gave that class where he gave a meditation before his japa. You want to comment on how much do these periphery things that we do in bhakti, do they facilitate bhakti? Are they necessary? There's many yoga ashrams in India that don't even have asana as part of a practice.
Well, asana is only part of those 4 paths. It's only part of one of those 4 paths. It's part of Ashtanga yoga. Now, that doesn't mean that a Jnana yogi or bhakti yogi couldn't practice asana, but it's not.
Many do.
many do, but it's not actually, it's not lit. It's not officially part of it. Let's say that. But you know, all of these, there's a whole coming out. You have this entire Vedic literature, and then from the Vedic literature, you have these kind of expanded sciences, Vedic sciences that grow out of them. And so you have Ayurveda, and you have asana, and you have Vastu, and so many other kind of schools. Like Vastu is kind of the architecture and the science of space, and Ayurveda is the science of health, how to live healthily. Asana also plays a role in that, and there's so many other sciences like that. Now, these are all valuable sciences, and they're special because they can take the mind to a particular place. They're good for a holistic, healthy lifestyle.
It's a holistic, healthy.
But they all lead to sattva. Like, for instance, a lot of people, most people in the Western world, when they get involved in yoga, they get involved in it through asana. Now, they could have chosen, and likely that their initial reason for it had to do with health or well-being. It had to do with their body, that it be healthy and attractive and strong and flexible and whatever. Now, they could have approached other means to achieve that. They could have got into spinning or so many other things, which can lead to health. But what asana can do that those others may not do is actually bring your mind to sattva guna, right? To bring your mind to a place of contentment and peace, whereas some of those other practices may actually just get you more wound up and more passionate.
I remember teaching at Kula in New York City, and had a great class there downtown in Manhattan. And one of my students were like, you should go to this some type of gym, some like weights and move it. I was like, yeah, I was trying to be open-minded about it, and I went to it. And as soon as I get in there, okay, you got to get a mat, you got to get a thing to step on, you need some little weights, go get them. The class is going to start. It's only an hour. And as soon as we got there, the instructor was like, just cranks up the music, and it's like, and I was just like trying to follow along, jumping up and down. And I tell you, I walked out of there like, I was like, I don't need my mind more wound up after I work out. I want to be calm. Right. I like yoga because of all those sattvic benefits that come with it. When you leave a shavasana, you're like, I've just been meditating for like an hour and a half. Even if you're doing strong things, it gets the mind super peaceful and calm.
So all of these Vastu and Ayurveda and asana along with it, they can, if one practices them nicely, it brings the mind to sattva guna, where the mind becomes content. And content means detached and lucid, right? Because detachment and clouds are clarity. Attachment clouds are clarity. When we think, I need this or that till I'm happy, then it begins to shift our our understanding of reality. Where from the platform of contentment, we can see what's what. We can understand what is valuable, what's not valuable, where I should focus, what I should let go of, what I should take seriously. That's manifest in the sattva guna, in that clear state of mind. So asana can help one achieve that. The way it may be practiced in a lot of studios, it may not even help you there. It may be a kind of super wound up kind of thing. But it
depending on what music they're playing, or depending on the mood of the teacher, if it's got a competitive edge, if it's ego based. There's 2 points I just want to share, Kaustubha, is just being around ashrams and bhakti-yogis, etc. Sometimes because they're not emphasizing a physical practice, devotees skip. People practice bhakti might just be like, well, it's not important. Why even bother doing it? And they get into health problems. And we see that again and again. They get into health problems as they get older. Yoga is an incredible friend to keep with physical practice of yoga. Incredible friend to keep with you as you age. I'm lucky I got into it as a young man, and it's been a best friend with me for a long time. And so it's one of these incredible practices just to keep the body open as my body ages. That was point 1. I think it's a great thing. We can't neglect it.
Point number 2.
And a great point 2 for you. Oh, here's point 2. And so I was in India leading a training, and I was with this master Ayurvedic doctor. You know who it was? It was Shambhalaba. Was it right?
Shambhalaba.
Shambhalaba.
Mm-hmm.
The one who passed away.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, I was like, what do you think? And he was like one of those like genius, enlightened Ayurvedic doctors. And I was like, what's your take on our yoga practice? He goes, very much different how you're doing in America. He said, truthfully, you do not even need to do yoga asanas. I was like, what? You're going to tell me? You're the Ayurvedic master. You're telling me you don't have to do it? He goes, you just need to eat very, very little and you'll have supreme health.
Yeah.
Is that interesting? You need to eat very, very little and you'll have supreme health.
Just don't abuse your body with food.
Yeah. I think our eating is based on addictions and habits. And we oftentimes eat for every reason except for hunger. Every other reason I eat to escape because I feel some emotion I don't want to deal with, and I'll shove something in my mouth, and just like bearing emotions with food. And therefore, the body needs so little just to survive. It's amazing.
It's amazing, Raghu.
It's amazing.
So asana, it's a beautiful practice. It's not at all essential to the practice of bhakti yoga. But what is consistent with bhakti yoga is that my body belongs to God. And I want to take good care of it. And if that's your motive behind doing asana, that I want to take good care of my body and also bring my mind to a nice sattvic place so that I can also engage the mind in God's service, then it becomes consistent.
Then it fits in just nicely.
Yeah.
For all people practicing asana out there. It's a beautiful marriage, isn't it?
Yeah. But maybe as a final thought for today, Raghu, is we're talking about these 4 paths of yoga and how they each have their means to an end.
Yeah.
And in Ashtanga yoga is trying to still the mind, and in Jnana yoga is trying to break the attachments of the mind. In Bhakti yoga, the idea is I just want to bring in the right impressions so that my mind becomes entirely harmonized with the nature of myself. That if I read the right books and I hear the right music and I associate with the right people and et cetera, that the impressions that I'm bringing into my mind are going to reprogram that mind, reshape that mind, so that the aspects of ego, that's or false ego, and the material desires that were there, they become replaced. And that's why what Prabhupada is saying here, I learned as a child to do this bhakti-related ritual, and that ritual stayed with me my entire life, and it matured. And the result of performing that kind of ritual is that the mind becomes attracted to the beauty of service. It becomes its desire, the desire within the mind, the attachment within the mind becomes that I want to be absorbed in this beautiful mood of service. And when the mind is situated like that, then it's entirely harmonious with the self. And there's no longer a disconnect, but there's a union between the mind and the soul. And another word for union is yoga. And so that's how bhakti yoga is practiced.
Here's my yoga asanas today. Thanks to everybody joining us. Tell your friends. Let's expand this. Tell everybody that you know. Tell your parents. Mara told Papa Tony. Now Papa Tony's here every day.
Papa Tony must have given Mara a lot of great impressions in her childhood, right?
Yeah. Maybe he even gave her a little baby Krishna deity.
Did he?
You didn't even know it.
Not that I recall.
Sometimes we have some Krishna thing in our life and we don't even know it. Then we get into Krishna and we're like, what the heck this was here the whole time? Thanks everybody joining us. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, you can go to Apple Podcasts right on your iPhone right now. I love saying
Stitcher's just your favorite one.
Go to Apple Podcasts right now. Pick up your phone, write a good review, say something nice. and leave 5 stars. It keeps us in the podcast world conversation. If you're listening on Zoom, or if you're one of the Zoomers and I didn't say good morning to you, good morning. Glad to have you. This is our lip syncing time where we dance around our office, our bedroom, our kitchen, and we put our hands in the air. We start to lip sync this song, or we just sing loud. If the kids are asleep, we sing soft and no one's around, we could just sing loud. If you're outside like Isabel, you just start screaming at Isabel. No one can hear you. And if your neighbors hear you, good for them. Chanting the holy name benefits all moving and non-moving beings. It benefits the postman, everybody that's coming by. If you're in your office, just scream louder. Let the boss hear you. Rupa and Kumari, good to see you there. They're screaming in the car. All the other cars are looking at them like, what's going on in that car? They're pulled over. Thanks for everybody joining us late in the day. If you want to join us on Zoom, people, email Mara, wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. And remember, we are a community-supported podcast. If you like what we're doing, go to patreon.com/wisdomofthesages. We have a whole Patreon labyrinth of all different stuff that's going on there. Classes, courses, sweet baby Krishnas that you can join in, and then that gives you whole access to our Discord discussion group, and these guys are talking nonstop all day about transcendental topics. Here we go. Ready? Let's kick this. Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Shri Krishna Bolo, Jai Radhe.